Well, that was interesting. Hi, guys. Brent Stafford here from RegWatch by regulatorwatch.com. All that big hoopla, and then it just doesn't work. Very strange. Tested a bunch of times there right before we actually went live. So look, this is a RegRant. So it's not unstructured and going to be pretty short. So I wanted to share with you guys a sneak peek of the interview that I just cut with Dr. Leon Shahab from the University College London. So we just cut it. So what time is it now? Yeah, about 20 after 3. So we finished up about an hour ago. So I quickly cut out a couple of sound bites that I think that are going to be really good that you're going to want to hear. And then it's going to be a couple of days before I get, one of my big produced pieces out. But it's really important that we get you stuff timely. So that's why I wanted to do this. Let me read you the lead so you can get a sense of what exactly this piece is going to be about. Though you're going to hear this again when the time comes. And it's a bit rough, but... Hi, I'm Brent Stafford, and this is RegWatch by regulatorwatch.com. For all of the sneering, snarling, and apoplectic rage directed towards vaping in the public sphere, behind the scenes, there's a sober, sinister scheme underway intended to destroy the fundamental science that supports vaping as a tool for harm reduction. Yeah, which is like totally true. Let's just see here if this is working. Yes, it is. All right, good. So we've been talking about this a little bit in and out some of our streams over the last 2 weeks, but definitely recently in the last 2. The key thing that's been going on has been an attack right at the heart of the fundamental science that's out there that underpins vaping. So I've just curated a bunch of new stuff here. So let me just get down to this. Normally I have this a little bit better prepared, but no. I had it, and then now I don't. Yeah, this is a really good story, actually. So one of the things that we've been tracking is what The Atlantic has been doing. The Atlantic, for those that don't know, it's one of the it's a liberal magazine, but I mean, it's more progressive than liberal. It's definitely a little bit more into the center. It's read by the most influential liberal elites that exist out there. And so watching what The Atlantic is writing with regard to vaping is really, really on the money. And in a moment of national panic, what is the safest way forward? And this is a bit of a backtrack for The Atlantic, coming out, trying to talk a bit better about the science, a bit more sober way in which they're coming at it. They're taking a while to get there. I mean, they're talking about anxiety and everything else, but it's a big but, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to walk back what they did on September 6th. And this is vaping's plausible deniability is going up in smoke. Ongoing FDA investigations and a spate of hospitalizations show that safer than cigarettes does not mean safe. And not only that, but they go straight in and really, really attack vaping. And that's The Atlantic. So they're trying to walk it back, which is good news. Right, because of course they were right there in the hysteria making on September 6th. So another place where the walking back is starting to happen, which is amazing. So this is kind of a good news story here. It's kind of a good news story here, is what was just in the Los Angeles Times, and I have to thank Bill Tarling for his help in the curation. I mean, if you guys don't know Bill and his work, he's just a fiend, right? In terms of getting stories and pushing them out. And so he feeds me stuff all the time. And a lot of our really good finds are from Bill. And I can't thank him enough. And it's this piece. It's pretty high up here on our curation. So All right. We're going to have Dr. Siegel back on the show on Friday. So a lot of development since he was first on, which was about 4 weeks ago, and we'll talk about him in a second. So, all right. So I wanted to make sure that we talk a little bit about some of the interesting things where there's some hope. All right. So we had Oregon go down. Here you go. And it's just, why do people look exactly like they think? Now, this is the Los Angeles Times. Vaping bans are supposed to help, but could they become a public health disaster? Okay, we're not going to... I've curated the whole thing here on RegWatch, and I steal the content. That's totally stealing. So, I mean, I don't like to do it a lot. But if it happens to be something that's really important, I think, for the viewers, I know that you don't always click through to the actual article. So I wanted to have it there. But let's take a look at this. This is Los Angeles Times. That's insane that the LA Times is doing this. I mean, it's shocking. And the article is strong. This is October 3rd. With multiple cities and states cracking down on vaping in recent weeks, spurred by a wave of mysterious illnesses and deaths, some public health advocates say they are energized by the sudden movement to reduce access to nicotine. Well, we know what side of public health those people are on. On a single day in Los Angeles County this week, at least 4 cities advanced laws that would greatly restrict the sales of tobacco. Massachusetts also recently instated a 4-month ban on e-cigarettes, while Michigan and New York outlawed flavored e-cigarette products. But increasingly, other public health experts are warning of the unintended consequences of this political momentum. Now, the LA Times has just acquiesced that this is a political movement, political momentum. That is striking, because of course they could easily have been describing this as saving the momentum to save the children, right? Or a bunch of different other ways, even just a generic public health, this momentum to, eradicate the scourge of nicotine or whatever. But to accurately and precisely and so high up in the story. So, I mean, it's not very many graphs down before they've said that. I mean, that's a defining statement about what's going on for their readers. And so and their readers are smart, no doubt. I mean, progressives are smart. They're treacherous, but they're smart, right? So that is I find that just stunning. But increasingly, other public health experts are warning of the unintended consequences of this political momentum. They point to what they see as a misdirection by health officials. The vaping illnesses that are sending people to the hospital have been largely linked to marijuana, particularly THC cartridges purchased illegally. They also worry that the recent rash of legislative efforts could actually harm public health by making e-cigarettes less accessible than cigarettes, which experts agree are more dangerous. For example, in San Francisco, the first city to ban e-cigarettes, residents soon will be unable to buy the devices, while cigarettes will remain on the shelves. Oh my God. I mean, it's just, I'm very happy that that's high up, right? They could have gone a little bit further, but they still don't want to poke themselves in the eye with regard to this whole entire disaster that progressives have created themselves, right? But here they are, one of the top, well, next to the New York Times, or I mean, it really is the LA Times, right? And being on the left coast, you could make the argument for sure that LA Times is much more left, for sure. Maybe not as left as the San Francisco Chronicle, but definitely left. So anyhow, I encourage everybody to go and take a look at this article because there's some hope here. You can read between the lines or not. It's just plain in front of you. And so there is some ammunition you could use here in plenty of ways, in good ways, not to actually attack, but to actually kind of politely nudge. And some names of some researchers that I don't yet know right here. And I'm going to reach out to them and see if we can get him. And there's some others that are down in here too as well. So there's definitely some real good hope. This is an article to share. This is one to pull stuff out of. This is one to use to help formulate, I would say, letters to your local newspapers and stuff like that. So instead of it just being, say, for instance, the standard, I'm not giving advocacy advice. I'm giving advice on how to work with the media, being from the media. And so if the standard fare that the local newspaper editor is getting is got what you would normally have been giving, stuff about how e-cigarettes saved your life, the importance of flavors, all of these things, what could happen to your business if it goes, all that stuff is totally great and huge, important. But you want to be looking for backup, right? And when progressives are leaking out backup like this, you want to take that backup and you want to incorporate it in very high into your own messaging, and then when you're communicating to other progressive media to try to get into it, this is backup, man. This is source material. This is creds for vaping in a big way that can get used for sure. So I would consider that. All right, so that's this one. Excuse me. I was up very, very, very late getting ready for this interview. And then let me just see here if there's one last more I wanted to look at, and then we will jump into Dr. Shahab. All right. Yeah, like I said, we're going to have him on. All right. Yeah, I was going to talk about Trump here too, real quick. All right. Trump, this is from October 7th is when I curated it, and I think it's an actual October 6th story. So this is just this week. This is this week. Now, I was under the assumption after the FDA commissioner had testified on the Hill, what was it, last week? Who can put the days together anymore? He had testified that we're not going to do a flavor ban. We're just going to enforce the existing law. Okay, so which would kind of mean that we're just doing the PMTA process, and we'll take it from there. So Trump's tweet, talk of a Trump nationwide flavor ban, off the table. That's kind of where you could get from that. Huffington Post, I haven't yet curated it yet. It's buried in 500 emails in my inbox. So when I get that up, it'll be a catch-up curate. But HuffPo did a piece on that about 7 days ago and called out that it looked like there would be no flavor ban. And I was kind of hopeful coming from HuffPo because they're crazy progressive, right? And but yeah, so this is out on the 6th, and this is from the Hill, so they'll know. And the Trump administration is under fire from conservative groups and some GOP lawmakers who are pushing back over its planned crackdown on e-cigarette flavors, which we know, right? They say the administration is overreaching and the flavor ban will harm small businesses, a violation of core Republican free market principles. I want everybody to just remember that for a sec, because the party in BC, in British Columbia, that is banning flavors here is the Free Enterprise Party in our state, province. And yeah. So far, President Trump has shown he will listen to his health advisors who say that sweeping the market of all flavors except tobacco is the best way to cut down on an epidemic of youth vaping. Okay, so the president is going to continue along in this terrible policy to implement a ban in order to fight the epidemic of youth vaping. So that brings us to our first soundbite, our third soundbite from Dr. Leon Shahab. Now, he is a neuroscientist. He holds 3 graduate degrees, master degrees at the graduate level, psychology, neuroscience, philosophy, health psychology is his PhD. This guy is amazing. So he's a part of that tight circle of all the top researchers in the world that we all know from the whole UK group. And here are his thoughts that are right now on 2019 data on US teen smoking rates?
This is data, I think, from the National Youth Tobacco Survey, which was recently put out by colleagues of mine here at UCL, which looked at data from 2014 to 2018. But the latest data, for instance, if you think about the concern that e-cigarette use will drive up cigarette smoking later, the latest data show that cigarette consumption or cigarette prevalence among kids has declined even further in 2019, which sort of puts the whole idea of a strong gateway effect to rest, as far as I can tell. Because, if there's a gateway effect, I'm not quite sure how long one has to wait for it to translate into actual population data. And the population data do seem to suggest that over the same time period that e-cigarettes have become more popular among adolescents, cigarette consumption, cigarette prevalence has continued to plummet. And it's now, I think, at the lowest rates that's ever been recorded.
The lowest rates it's ever been recorded. That is stunning. So that's the actual U.S. data from the U.S. government that is showing us smoking is at the lowest rates has ever been recorded. But yet you still have all of the top public health officials in the U.S. Chirping in the administration's ear about what to do. And so they're sweeping the market of e-cigarette products in order to save the kids is just completely, totally whacked out. Now, I'm going to play you one more. I'm not going to tee it up. I'm just going to let it happen because the questions are not included in these bites, and this question was a doozy. So this is following along on that same track here.
That's interesting. I wasn't going to comment on that in particular. I would just argue, really, that maybe in the UK, we look at the cold hard facts. And so one cold hard fact I can give you in relation to this recent spate of lung disease is that, yes, it's unfortunate, in particular that kids die. And I think the numbers were 18 kids have died in about 1,000 cases. But if you look at the cold hard facts and you look at public health at population level, over the same time period, so last 2 months, about 75,000 smokers have died in the USA. And equally, over the same time period, there were 21,000 people affected by eating contaminated food and 500 deaths just due to eating contaminated food. Now, nobody would argue, therefore, we have to, ban all food. You just have to, take a reasoned approach to the fact that it's likely there's some kind of contamination going on, some kind of adulteration in some of these products. But by comparison, it is, I think, very clear to me, anyhow, if you look at public health outcome on the whole, is that, smokers are the people that we have to help.
All right. And that's kind of nuts. And I've just gone over to, there's something breaking here. Oh, I got audio. Well, that's too bad. There we go.
Let people know about it because people are going to. But we can't allow people to get sick, and we can't have our youth be so affected. And I'm hearing it, and that's how the First Lady got involved. She's got a son together that is a beautiful young man, and she feels very, very strongly about it. She's seen it. We're both reading it. A lot of people are reading it, but people are dying with vaping. So we're looking at it very closely. And, if nothing else, this is a conference that's going to let people know about it because people are going to watch what we're saying. And parents are going to be a lot tougher with respect to their children. A lot of people think vaping is wonderful, it's great. It's really not wonderful. That's one thing I think we can say definitely, Commissioner. It's not a wonderful thing. It's got big problems. We have to find out the extent of the problem. It's so new. It's so new. But we're going to find out. And I hope that parents that, they have children and the children are a certain age, I hope they're going to be able to make wise decisions, maybe based on what we're saying today. But the Commissioner and Alex Azar, they're going to be coming back over the next pretty short period of time, a couple of weeks, with some very strong recommendations.
Well, then.
Amazing, as usual.
Hold on.
Shall we?
Yeah.
Well, then. I guess that says that. So nothing good can be said about vaping. That's from the President of the United States. I've been a Trump supporter for a good long time, but he's fully jumped the shark here. And it's not just this issue, but wow. So I was going over there to the Independent there to talk about the vaping for long periods of time could increase the risk of cancer, which is this study that just came out. And we have Dr. Shahab speaking to that. But that is just crazy. That is nuts. So look, let's play this last bite, and then I'm just going to shake my head because, you know, this has still got to be a family channel. The kids. The only thing I can say that I agree with what the president just said was that basically parents have to get much, you know, harder on their kids, right? They have to parents need to take some responsibility, and they need to make their kids take some responsibility for what they do. But the problem is, right, is that like for 20 years or more, but definitely 20, right? The responsibility word is just been, you know, I mean, it's just, it's like poison, right? To use the word responsibility in some circles, if you were to do that, you get called a fascist, a Nazi, for saying that people need to be responsible for what they do. So I do agree with the president on that, and I wholeheartedly disagree with everything else. Everything else he said makes absolute no sense. And yeah. You know, I fear that in a way, they're concerned about an entire generation of young people getting addicted to nicotine. And in exchange for trying to prevent that, they are creating an entire 2 generations of adults that absolutely resent kids that have vaped. I mean, could you really actually, I mean, like, do you have a kid in your life that has been irresponsibly vaping? Do you have a friend, a peer, that has a kid who has irresponsibly vaped? I mean, I think it's about time adults start admonishing other adults who have allowed this to happen. I mean, where's the responsibility here, right? The responsibility should be on the parents and the kids, the teachers, and then, of course, the industry has its issues, there's no doubt. But it's capable of handling it. There is nothing capable here. So, as Dr. Shahab said, that in the almost 2 months or so that this whole hysteria has been going on, 72,000 Americans have died from smoking-related disease. And then there's just the 18 youth. And the two are not connected, right? Separate industries, separate products. All right, guys. So I'm going to have to get going here. This is supposed to be a real short, little bit of an interlude. This is going to be out in a couple of days. I plan to hopefully get some stuff out on BC because British Columbia has now tabled. I mean, it's not actually really legislation. It's just 4 amendments. And really only wrapped around one, which was one line that says you can't sell flavored vapor products anymore in the province of British Columbia. It's like one line. I don't think that'll pass. It'll be. Is there a plan for how all the shops have to shut down and how's it going to be enforced? I mean, they just don't think of they've got an intended consequence and they haven't even thought that through, which is what's so crazy about it. So. And the last thing here before I ditch out, I will play you this last soundbite too before we head out. Is again, you know, it's really important. I mean, it's absolutely critical for us that for you guys to jump in and help give us some support on. Let me just get this right here for our vaping coverage. Right? Because, I mean, it will go dark. I mean, everybody else has got the same problems as we do, so there's no doubt about that. But we're working hard to get our system is in place, and it's one where We're not asking for a lot to help us keep going, right? It's a lot of people with small dollars. And it's only if you find that there's value here, right? There has to be value, and I hope you get it. Now, our show and our regular tape stuff is not built on, a kind of a YouTube structure. Our model was broadcast television. Our model still is broadcast quality television online in a platform that's wrapped around to have, not usually very exciting conversations or entertaining ones about regulations. I mean, that's what we do. And vaping is obviously, we got on it, and it's just right on the money for us politically in terms of what we're trying to fight for. The enemy is the same enemy as the other issues that we fight on. And right now, we want to win this fight. It's just incredible that that this has happened. It's just a travesty. It will go down, I'm certain of that, as the biggest public health scandal in the history of the United States. Now, Canada had one that was pretty bad, which was the tainted blood scandal. The government knew, or at least they put their hands in front of their eyes, during the 80s and early 90s, and they allowed so many people to get infected with HIV-infected blood in blood transfusions. It was just, I can't even get it out. It was just horrific. It took 20 years before the full enormity of that scandal came out, and it was a huge scandal. And so public health has been known to allow people to die. And so, that's likely what's happening here. And so, look, the vaping industry is going to go away, but it's under some tough times. There's no doubt. We're going to be here to cover it. We need your help to do that. There's no doubt. The key thing to note, and I think that for us to make the argument on why you should separate your dollars from your pocket and send them RegWatches away, one of them is just understanding that there's all these world-class researchers for 4 years. They come on our show. New ones coming on our show right now. There's more that want to come on our show. Our platform is a platform where the only one where they know that they can get a whole hour to sit down in a friendly environment to really talk through the issues and to talk through their research. That's of huge value. The regulators watch our stuff. We know politicians watch our stuff. And we know you watch our stuff. So hopefully you'll go to support.regulatorwatch.com and part with a few bucks today. Awesome. Here is the last bite. This is in regards to the research on the lung.
This particular article, and this is because over decades and decades of research, nicotine has not been shown to be carcinogenic to humans. There are some studies that suggest they may be carcinogenic in certain circumstances in animals, but humans and animals, humans and mice, rodents in particular, are quite different. Animal research, I'm just to go a bit broader on this and then specifically talk about this particular paper. Animal studies are, of course, quite helpful, but they have always their own problems. There's a good starting point. Cecily, they're not very helpful when we're trying to evaluate quite complex behaviors. And arguably vaping or smoking are quite complex behaviors. We can't get a mouse to actually smoke or vape. And so what people do is they put them into a cage and they fill the cage with either smoke or vapor. And that is already right at the bottom problem because the way that it's inhaled will have an impact. As one example, if you inhale more deeply into the lung because you include perforations on cigarettes, you find that actually people develop cancers in completely different locations. Now, a mouse won't be able to do that, so it's not particularly ecologically valid to look at, for instance, locations of tumors. What's more, it's very difficult to calibrate the exposure level. So mice will, for instance, lick deposits of their fur or the surface. Humans wouldn't lick a surface, so they probably get even more out of it than a human would do. So likely exposing them to more harmful substances. But more importantly, I think there are physiological differences. So mice, for instance, are much more sensitive to nicotine. And so some of the results that we see in studies, including this one, are likely to be the result of nicotine poisoning. In fact, in this particular study, some of the mice died during the exposure levels, right? So they're exposed to far higher levels of vapor than a human would be. A colleague of mine tried to work out what it is, and they basically calculated they're exposed to 450 years of vaping in just a year. And that tells you something about the fact that these are quite unrealistic use conditions.